Now today we're talking about a subject that is very near and dear to my heart in music production, and that is the art of sampling. Now we know that hip hop isn't the only genre that makes use of sampling. There's a lot of genres actually out there, but today we're talking about an equally awesome direction that you can take your samples, and that is French house. Now there's some different techniques involved with making French house, but I'm gonna go through some of the tips and tricks that you can extract from the genre and incorporate into your own compositions to up your sampling game to the next level. If that sounds good to you, let's get into it. Most people, I think, associate the genre with artists like Daft Punk, who's a big one, Bob Sinclair, Justice, just to name a few. You know, this is a dance genre, so we're gonna be working in the BPM range between, 110 and 130, depending on the source material that we're sampling. So once we've got our BPM locked in, what we wanna think about next, obviously, is what to sample. Now, if you really wanna hone in on like the defining characteristics of French house, you gotta start with sampling disco records from the 1970s and 1980s. So you wanna look at artists like, Sister Sledge, Earth, Wind & Fire, Rose Royce, whatever, gets you grooving. Now, once you've picked out a track that you want to sample, what I recommend you do is just listen through to the whole thing and start flagging different parts of the track that catch your ear. So it could be like, the horn section melody or the string section melody or just a certain chord progression or bass line or just anything. Something that makes you feel something. And then I like to just go through and chop it up and color it, so that I know to go back to it once I've finished the song. But listen through to the whole thing, because you never know what you're gonna be ignoring at the very end of the song. So if we did it with this little sample here, right? Maybe I kind of like this little piece here. And once I start looping it, I could start building the song around that little chop there. What I really like to do is find one particular chop that I like and then search in the immediate section before or after the chop that I'm working with and try to rearrange it in an interesting way. It's almost like you're doing like a little bit of a remix with the sample. So as an example, we're gonna start with this little Delegation record, which is one of my favorites. Okay, so the two sections that I really like are this one and this one here. And so now I'm gonna try to figure out a way of combining them together in an interesting way over a 4 on the floor beat. What I was kind of hearing in my head is we could maybe repeat this. And then add the other chop here at the end. Or we could even divide that up into two like this and get a little bit more creative with it, right? That's really got that Daft Punk kind of feel. Or maybe another way that we could rearrange it in a cool way is something like this. So mess around with that and start thinking and conceptualizing, rearranging different parts of the sample in that way. Another technique that I like to use from French house sampling is to isolate kind of a vocal phrase and then use that to create new meaning for the track that you're working on by just using like these small repeatable phrases. So if we took this little section here and we wanted to apply that technique, now if we chop up this little middle section here and repeat it, watch what happens. It sounds like she's saying, move if you move if you move, which is an awesome way to build a dance track or to build around that phrase in a dance track. And then she also says, just keep on, so we could add that at the end as well. Just keep on. And it honestly doesn't matter if that's actually what she's saying, it's only what it sounds like that matters. Now for all of you connoisseurs out there, or those of you who caught our video on sampling like Tribe Called Quest, one of the main things that they do is called applying a technique of low-end theory, which is essentially where you copy your sampled track and you apply a low-pass filter at a certain cutoff frequency that essentially isolates the bass line so you can change the level or process it in a certain way apart from the other aspects of the sample. Now this is really nice to do with the the low end, especially in a dance track like this, when you have a nice bass line to work with. What I recommend you do is just duplicate the track, put a low pass filter on it, maybe somewhere around 300 hertz or so like I've done here. And this is kind of what it sounds like here. And then what you can do is copy whatever plugin you use to apply that steep low pass filter. And you can just put it into the original track and then change the filter type to be a high pass filter on the other track. So one's kind of high pass and one's low pass so that the low end isn't conflicting too much. And so then this is what the original would sound like. And then when you put them together, and you can, of course, play with those different cutoff frequencies to help reduce the crossover dip a little bit. I think the best part about doing this for French house is that you can employ that classic phaser technique on the original track and not the low end track, which is going to be really important because if you put a phaser on something that has a lot of low end in it, you're going to get all kinds of cancellation artifacts, which you probably don't want. And it just helps really clean things up. So you can use whatever phaser your DAW comes with to achieve this effect. So we're really going for that slow, swirling phaser sound. So it might sound something like this. However, there's a very famous piece of gear that was used a lot. I think it was called the Ensoniq DP4. And that is one of the main pieces of gear that got that Daft Punk kind of phasery sound on the sampling. So if you want to get that specific sound, there is actually an emulation plugin for that particular piece of gear by a company called Dusty Devices. And the plugin is called Phaser DDL, and it sounds really good. This is so far the only emulation of that particular piece of gear that I've been able to find. So if you're interested in getting the details right, definitely check out this plugin from Dusty Devices called Phaser DDL. Now the last important part of the chain to get that French house sampling sound is that you want to do some side chaining. And back in the day, they used to actually push the kick and the original sample through an Alesis 3630, I believe, that specific compressor, because it had this, really crazy pumping sound. And that's really what's going to get you that original French house sampling sound. But if you want to use a normal compressor to achieve that sound with, your classic key input from the kick, you can totally do that too. I prefer to have a compressor on an aux or return track, so that way I can send as many tracks as I want to using the same compressor in the exact same settings, and I don't have to copy and paste everything. But another nice little trick that you can use is that you can actually, with your kick that you've got going 4 on the floor, just like this, I've got one of the samplers just playing a rim shot like this that's muted. And I'm sending that and using that as the input for my sidechain compression. So in Ableton, if you're using a compressor, you can just activate this sidechain button here on the left, and then you can select audio from kick. Under the second menu, you can select your sidechain, which I called SC. The really nice part about working this way is that you'll have a lot of control over the release time, regardless of the type of kick that you're using, because sometimes you'll have a longer kick, and you're not going to want to have it sitting there ducking everything for as long as the kick is, and then if you swap out the kick, it's going to change all the settings. So I like to have just a rim shot, and you can have it as short as you want for that reason. So this is what it'll sound like with the kick in there and the sidechain compression going. All right, guys, I hope these techniques help you get off to a great start with this genre and, open up all kinds of possibilities with your sampling adventures. So as always, happy music making, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Peace.